Hello, and welcome to the Homeschool Sanity Show, your prescription for happier, healthier homeschooling. I'm your host, Dr. Melanie Wilson, Christian psychologist turned homeschooling mother of 6. Let's get started. Hey, homeschoolers. I've done a couple of episodes on marriage over the years, and I don't think that's nearly enough. A strong marriage is like a strong foundation for your house. Without it, your homeschool can crumble. This is not to discourage those whose marriages have ended or are in serious trouble. God is in the renovation business. He is able to make beauty from ashes. Those of us who are married need to make our marriage a priority. My guest will help us with that. But first, I want to thank my sponsor, CTC Math. Are you looking for a new math curriculum? CTC Math specializes in providing online video tutorials that take a multi-sensory approach to learning. Favorably reviewed in Kathy Duffy's 102 Top Picks and the Old Schoolhouse Crew Review, the lessons are short and concise to help your children break down concepts and appreciate math in a whole new way. The lessons are taught the traditional way, not to a test. Each one of the video tutorials is taught by an internationally acclaimed teacher, Pat Murray, who is renowned for teaching math concepts in a simple, easy-to-understand way and in only a few minutes at a time, using a multi-sensory approach having the combination of effective graphics and animation synchronized with the voice of a friendly teacher, together with practical assessment. This three-pronged attack makes learning so much easier and more effective. Even students who struggle with math are getting fantastic results, and ones who were doing okay before are now doing brilliantly. Visit ctcmath.com today to start your free trial. Now let's talk about homeschool marriage. My guest is Scott LaPierre. Scott is the senior pastor of Woodland Christian Church, an author, and a conference speaker. He and his wife Katie grew up together, and God has blessed them with 8 children they homeschool, with a 9th on the way. Pastor Scott's books are Christian nonfiction, largely taken from his expository preaching. I know you will appreciate his counsel. Scott, thank you so much for joining me here on the Homeschool Sanity Show. I would love to have you get us started by introducing yourself and your family to us, and then telling us why you decided to homeschool.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Melanie, for inviting me on your show. Really glad to be here and get to know you and your listeners a little more. So my name is Scott LaPierre. I'm a senior pastor in Southwest Washington, and we've been here since 2010. And we have 8 children with, we found out a couple months ago, we have a 9th on the way. And we're pretty excited about that because my wife turns 40 this year. Weren't sure what else God would have for us. And we'd had a miscarriage, maybe like pretty early, a month or 2 before that. And so we felt thankful that God blessed us with another child so quickly. And I do some authoring and some speaking, largely authoring. My books come from the content of my sermons. I don't have enough time to prepare sermons and write books separately. So if I have a book, more than likely I preach the content in it to my church. And so I became a Christian in my early 20s while I was teaching elementary school. And that's pretty much when I decided that I wanted to homeschool. I was not raised in a Christian home. And I became very close with the pastor and his family of the church where I was saved. And his daughter actually taught elementary school with me, and I became friends with her. And she, some of the people at the school invited me to this church. I became a Christian at that church and became close with the family and closer with them than my own family, because my family were not Christians at that time. And they homeschooled, and that was my exposure. That was my introduction to homeschooling. And I was really blown away by many of the things that I saw. I was deeply attracted to the unity and the joy that I saw in that family. And I'm sure it wasn't like that all the time. Behind closed doors, sometimes things look a little different. But I became pretty attracted to homeschooling at that time. And then the other thing, sometimes people say, well, you were an elementary school teacher. Why would you think of homeschooling? And I regularly respond and say, I want to homeschool because I was an elementary school teacher. there were things that I saw in elementary school that I did not want my children to be around. And, we can talk about some of those things if you're interested. Some of them you can guess that are just especially it's getting even worse. I mean, this is almost 20 years ago when I was teaching, and things are accelerating at a really astonishing rate. Legislation that's coming down, things that teachers are forced to teach. Back then, probably the worst thing was you're kind of afraid if you're going to have to talk about evolution. And as a Christian, you're going to handle it and say, well, this is just a theory. But now, I mean, the things with transgenderism and homosexuality at such a young age, I'm very thankful that I'm not in that position to have to teach any of it, and also not have any of my children exposed to it. And then the other thing is there are many students around your child, even if you happen to be, and the way they do it in the school system, understandably, is, for lack of a better way to say it, I hate to say bad kids, but they're going to spread out the bad kids among all the classrooms. And so your child, even in one of the best classrooms, is going to have some other children around, and you can't control the way those children talk to your kids, the things they say to them, whether, if not in the classroom, then, during lunch and on the playground. And these are, I guess, kind of secondary issues for homeschooling. The main reason I wanted to homeschool was I became very convinced biblically that my children are my responsibility. I did not think that even if I could be theoretically convinced that my child would be in a great classroom, surrounded by Christian kids, with a Christian teacher, my children are my children. God has given them to me. Ephesians 6, as their father, I am commanded to train them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord. The language of Deuteronomy 6, we're told to talk to our children about these things when they stand up, when they lie down, how the verses, that language there is so strong about our children hearing the word, but it's coming from the parents and not someone else. And I felt I'm part of an organization that's called Church and Family Life, which is a lot of kind of family integrated churches. It used to be called NCFIC, the National Center for Family Integrated Churches, and they changed the name. It was a very good name change. But these family integrated churches, they generally might not even have youth pastors. And one of the reasons is because we think, and I say this, and I am a pastor. I mean, I love the church. I love the local church. And I say that even children are not even the responsibility of the church. And so if I don't think that the church is responsible for raising children, then I definitely think that the school system and the government is not responsible with raising children. And so I love the children in the church. I could not be more thankful and privileged to be their pastor, hopefully their friend, many of them. But we tell the families that the fathers are the shepherds or youth pastors, you might say, of these children. And so it's not even the church's responsibility to raise children. So that was a very big conviction for Katie and I to be responsible with the training of our children.
Wow, that's a really inspiring story. So I hope you have encouraged my listeners to consider your reasons for homeschooling, because they certainly are still reasons to choose homeschooling today. Absolutely. Well, today we are going to shift gears just a little bit, and talk about marriage. So we talk a lot about parenting and, how to provide our kids with the best education, but we talk less, at least on this podcast, about marriage. I have done a podcast or two. I know I've done at least 2 podcast episodes on marriage. One, I had my husband join me for that episode, and I will put a link to that episode in the show notes. But we have been married for this summer. It will be 29 years. It is hard for me to believe, very hard for me to believe, because it's just gone by so quickly. And one of the things that I emphasize when I speak to homeschoolers is that having a strong marriage is providing what is best for your kids. If you love your kids, you will do what you can. And sometimes it's not always in your control, right? But you will do what you are able to do to provide a strong marital relationship for your family, because that is the biggest threat to your homeschool. It's not the, the authorities, Division of Family Services knocking on your door. It's your marriage falling apart and your spouse suing you and saying, this person can't homeschool. She's not a good teacher. She shouldn't be allowed to homeschool my kids. That is a bigger threat. So let's talk about being homeschoolers and being married. What are some of the unique challenges that we face as parents who are providing their kids education?
Well, first, let me just say it was really difficult for me to remain quiet that long because I constantly wanted to interrupt to affirm the things that you were saying. My church is 90-something% homeschooling families. I perform an amount of counseling, even though I do most of the preaching. I do some counseling. Most of the counseling is marriage counseling. And if I kind of back up and I put myself back even in the classroom, when students would come to school and they're having the greatest trouble paying attention, it isn't frequently because they were up too late playing video games and they're falling asleep. It's not because some kid at school is picking on them. It's because their parents were fighting. It's because some problem associated with their home life has been impacting them. So I love how you were saying that, the greatest threats to homeschooling are not necessarily external or outward, but they're internal. They're in the home. They're between mom and dad. And I saw that if a child's parents are going through a divorce, you're almost guaranteed to not be able to make any academic, emotional, mental progress with that child because they're so discouraged, depressed, distracted by everything that's happening with mom and dad. And so the best way to see our children thrive in homeschooling is to provide a wonderful home environment for them. And that means a strong relationship between mom and dad. And to be clear, Katie and I, we're cloaked in flesh. We have conflicts with each other. We can see the way that it affects our own children. And we had to go to our kids and say, hey, please forgive me for the way that I talked to mommy, or Katie has, please forgive me for disrespecting daddy. And we want our children alleviated of that concern that there's any tension or conflict between the two of us. And so as far as some of the threats, when families homeschool, there's so much energy is really pulled into homeschooling that it can threaten threaten the marriage relationship. And I'll just give you one simple example. When our children go to bed, that's just about our only time together as a couple. And so you would think we'd look forward to it. I mean, we do look forward to it. But sometimes I feel like Katie especially is so tired that it's like, I see her on the couch and she's just exhausted. I mean, there's so much energy that's pulled into homeschooling our children that the marriage can take second place to that. Actually, this week, the reason I scheduled this interview with you this week is I don't have a sermon this week. My associate pastor preaches for me every once in a while. And Kate and I went away a couple nights together, just the two of us. And we paid some young ladies in the church to come and watch our children for us. And we do that for our children, in a sense. I mean, you could say, well, you're leaving your kids at home and you're not paying attention to them or investing in them. Well, actually, we're investing in them indirectly because we're investing in our marriage. And if our marriage is coming apart at the seams, then we're not going to be of any service to our children. And so we think and the other thing is, there have been times when Katie and I had a conflict in the morning before I headed to work. We live near the church, so I walk to my office, and Katie has basically told me, I'm not going to be able to do this today unless things are resolved between us. I'm not going to be able to function. She'll kind of say, I'm not going to have a good day unless I know things are good with us. So rare is the homeschooling mother who can have a conflict with her husband and then turn around and do a good job with her children. And so that's one thing I can say to any husbands who are listening, that it is so important for us as the spiritual leaders of the marriage a husband might feel fine, for example. You kind of think of the language in 1 Peter 3:7 that a man's prayers will be hindered if he's not treating his wife well. And that's definitely, that verse is, kind of rung in my ears when I've left the house and had to turn around and go home because I knew I'd get to my office and not be able, God wouldn't hear me when I pray, or study his word. He's not going to open the scriptures to me and help me to put sermons or anything together. I've had to turn around, do a 180, go back and reconcile, make sure everything's good with Katie. But even if by chance I felt fine and thought and ignored the Holy Spirit's conviction and just went to the office, it's important for husbands to know that the wife probably is not doing fine. And she's going to have a lot of kids who are pulling on her. And the last thing that she needs nagging at her is, a conflict with her husband. So if for no other reason, husbands need to really adore and cherish our wives so that they can do a good job with their children. And then the other thing is it's just easy to neglect it's when you have children who are pulling on you and want something and need something, it's a lot easier to put off your spouse than it is to put off that, I hate to say the word nagging, but nagging child. And so it ends up being a spouse that's neglected before a child is often neglected. And so because of that, the marriage can really suffer. And so that's why it's so important to be deliberate, intentional, and say, hey, this math lesson or reading lesson can wait for tomorrow. We don't have to do this. Let's go spend some time together as a family or spend some time together as a couple. We don't like screens. We're not real big on electronics. We like our kids drawing, building, crafts or Legos, things like that. But there are times we put them in front of, a screen to watch something because it's like, we need them occupied so we can talk as a couple. And if we turn something on.
Absolutely.
And so, some of these families, and they're like, well, our kids never watch a movie, in front of the screen. And I'm like, no, your kids must be pretty young. Give it some time. And you're going to need something to.
Yeah. And, really, the more kids you have too, although I'm sure you have found, like I have, that in some respects, the more kids you have, the easier it is for them to entertain one another. When I have been in the very rare situation of having just one child at home, I'm like, really? This kid is just right by me, talking the whole time. And you're just like, I need these other kids to come back.
Yeah.
But yes, that is so, so true. And you really led me into some other questions that I have for you, because when I have talked about dates, for example, or going away with your husband to have some alone time, I get pushback because people will say, I can't afford that. I don't know anyone. I don't live by family to have them help me with childcare. And I've even had people say, I'm supposed to be home. I'm supposed to be home with my kids. That's my calling. And I'm not supposed to be just going off somewhere. So what is your response to that?
Mm-hmm. Well, two things real quick. I don't want to forget to say this. I want to pass on some encouragement to young mothers who have a couple small children, and give basically the same encouragement that was given to us. It was when we had 3 children, and I think they were all pretty young. I don't know if they were all under 4 or something, but it was close to that. And it was a gentleman who had 12. They had 12 children. And he told me, he said, this is actually the most difficult. Tell your wife that it's going to get easier. And she's in the trenches right now. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Because in my mind, I'm like, we have 3. How are we going to handle 5, 6, 10, whatever God gives us, which is our approach. Is, you hear of someone that has 8 or 10 kids or something. You think, well, they tried. That's the language we use. They must have tried to have a lot of kids. It wasn't that. We just turned it over to God and wanted him to give us what he's wanted. He could have given us 2. He could give us, 12. I mean, it's just, we wanted to reach the end of our lives and have what he had for us. But anyway, so I'm thinking we're going to have some more. And I'm like, boy, if we can't handle this, what's it going to be like when this is twice as many? And he said, no, it's going to get easier. The kids will get older. The older ones will be able to help the younger ones. And so any mothers who are sitting there with, 3 small children struggling, thinking they're drowning, and, kind of Jim Gaffigan is a comedian we like. And he said, what's it like having this many kids? And he says, you're drowning and holding 3 kids, and then someone hands you another child,
Right.
So for any women who feel that way, it does get better and easier. When we actually went away, I know everyone won't have this luxury, but there's a doctor we know, and he has a very nice house, and they invited us over one time. and they told us that we were welcome to come over and use their basement. And, to be honest, it's a basement that's nicer than most houses that I've ever been in. It's more their middle floor. It's not really a basement, but I think this is our fourth time going, and they always let us stay there for free. And so I know everyone doesn't have that luxury, but what a blessing it is for us. We pay a babysitter, then we go buy some food, and we're not eating out. We might eat out once, but pretty much what's the reason we're going? We're going to spend time together. We're going. And the other thing is, when we go away, Katie wants to rest, and I don't mind that. I bring other stuff to work on, and we get there, and she's tired, and she says, "I'm going to go lay down," and I hope she can nap for 3 hours if she wanted to, because she doesn't get that luxury when she's at home. And so, why is it you want to go away? If you want to go away to spend time together and invest in your marriage, you don't need something fancy and expensive to do that. So if you're trying to go on a $5,000 or $6,000 cruise or something, or take some exotic vacation, then yes, it's reasonable to complain about the money. The other thing is for people that say, you shouldn't be doing this, that it's selfish. It's never selfish to invest in your spouse and invest in your marriage, because again, that is an investment in your children. And there's a little bit of a balance, obviously. I mean, if a couple was trying to go away, once a month or twice a month, but who's doing that? Most people you have to encourage them to go away, once a quarter, right, or 2 or 3 times a year is what we're talking about here. We're not talking about leaving your kids 2-3 days per week or something. Most homeschool parents could probably afford, for the health of their marriage, to get away more frequently together. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the good response is we are actually, believe it or not, doing this for our children, because the healthier our marriage, then the healthier environment we have for them.
Mm-hmm. Do you have, besides, that wonderful opportunity that someone blessed you with to get away together, do you have a time in your marriage where it's just the two of you talking? Do you make time to do, just have conversations or pray together and that kind of thing?
Good. Very good. Well, so kind of 2 points. When we first got married, before we had children, I was committed to reading the Word with Katie. And when we started having children, that time really diminished to where we did not have time, the two of us reading the Word, because we were trying just to make sure we had time with our family reading the Word. So and I don't know if other people can do it differently than us, we have our family worship. I stress that. I think it's very important for families to be gathered around the Word of God. But we don't have the time to be able to have our family worship, me, Katie, and the children together, and then a separate time for Katie and I together around God's Word. But that's still a time. Even though the kids are with us, that's still an investment in Katie as well. I'm washing her and the children with the Word, which is very important. As far as the two of us being together, which I also think is important, we go over the sermon together every Thursday evening. In fact, the reason I scheduled this, I told you I'm not preaching this Sunday. I scheduled the interview this Thursday evening because I knew I wouldn't be going over the sermon with Katie. But it's so many, the families in my church have heard me say so many times when I was going over the sermon with Katie, that one family started sending children over to watch our children so that Katie and I could go over the sermon together. Talk about a wonderful blessing that has been for us. And so these usually a son and a daughter come over, play with our kids look forward to it. And that time when we're going over the sermon together, it takes us, I don't know, maybe 3-4 hours, but that's because we get distracted. We enjoy talking. It's our alone time. And then we do the same thing. I kind of make the changes to my sermon on Friday, and then we get together again on Saturday and go over the sermon again. And usually goes a little quicker because the sermon is more polished. But again, we find ourselves talking about many other things in our lives and in the church, in our family. And so I understand people aren't going over, probably don't have the same situation as me to go over a sermon, but I appreciate what you're, gently alluding to, that husbands and wives need time together. I think I've heard of couples, and it happens in homeschooling environments, where they, the husband and wife get older and kind of look back and realize that they don't recognize each other anymore. We've been so busy and we're so worn out and tired, and it's just we just fall into bed, at the end of the day, and we don't know who the other person is anymore. And we don't want that. We hope as I believe all couples do, that our relationship gets sweeter the longer that we're married, and we we develop more affection for each other. But I think that can only happen when we're prioritizing their relationship. So some people have said you have to have a date night. I've never really said that, but I would say you do need a time that is just the two of you. So whether you don't necessarily need to go out and spend money, but if it's a walk, if it's going to the park, if it's bringing a meal with you, if money's tight, you need some time, and take whatever steps are necessary. I don't like, like I said, putting kids in front of screens, but if you got to put them in front of a screen so that you have an evening together, and go ahead and do that. Because if you wait till the kids go to bed, at least in our home, probably going to be too tired to give each other, you just giving each other what's left over.
Right. Absolutely. So what are some things that we can do that are practical to stay connected in our marriage?
So 1 Peter 3:7, it talks to husbands. You have those first 6 verses for wives about submitting to their husband. And then this verse, I think it's there basically to prevent men from abusing the authority that they were given in the previous 6 verses. I heard a woman say when a woman went up and said, there's 6 verses for women and 1 verse for husbands because a man can only remember 1 verse.
That's cute.
But there's so much packed into that verse about dwelling. Okay, so dwelling with your wife in an understanding way, dwelling with her according to knowledge, depending on the translation. And it means a husband should learn his wife, learn about her, what she likes, enjoys, dislikes. And I've found, I put on marriage conferences. We've been doing this for a few years. It's one of our joys. I have never met a woman who didn't appreciate her husband getting to know her and learning her and understanding her, and how sad it is when there are men who know more about sports teams or automobiles or movies than they know about their wives. And so that's just, because Ephesians 5, husbands, love your wives. We know that very well. But what does that look like practically, besides washing your wife with the word and those other verses in Ephesians 5? One of the other big things is learning and understanding your wife. And being sensitive to her. And for me, that means appreciating, it can mean appreciating some of your wife's weaknesses, being gracious toward those weaknesses, finding out how you can best support her. And then for husbands, there are men and they feel disrespected because they think that the children are more important to their wives than they are. I know a gentleman and his family homeschools, and he said he comes home, and this is just an example he gave me, but I thought I understood it, and I thought it was pretty reasonable that he comes home and his wife never seems to have anything prepared for him, and whether it's a meal or whatever it is, because all of her attention is went to the children. And he's not a lazy man. He could easily go get a meal or whatever for himself, but it's what it communicated that he is a far second to his children and to him. Like I said, he felt disrespected. And I never talked to his wife, but if I could, I would say, hey, when your husband knows you love your children, I mean, that's important, but he needs to know too that he's valuable to you and that it's not just all about them and that you drop everything or drop the kids at a drop of a hat, you ignore your husband for them. Because one of the things we're trying to keep this in mind, because people have told us this, these years go by quickly, the kids leave the home and we have each other then. And so, yes, value your children, invest in them, raise them to know the Lord. But there's a point they're going to leave, and it's going to be Katie and I left. And we want to have a strong, healthy marriage for that season of life when it approaches.
Mm-hmm. I was definitely in that situation when I started homeschooling. I was doing it more as a test run than anything, because my oldest was a preschooler, and I thought, well, I'll just try this, And I did not have dinner ready. I had no idea what to make. I hadn't done any homeschooling. My house was a mess. So the only thing that I could say that I had accomplished was my children were clothed and they had been fed, but that was pretty much it, and there were days, I'm just going to be 100% honest. There were days that I was angry that my husband expected me to know what was for dinner. It's like, if you had to do what I just did today, you wouldn't know what was for dinner either, And I thought he was being insensitive to even expect that. But the truth was that deep down, I was very disappointed that I couldn't figure out how to do what other women were apparently doing in homeschooling and parenting and keeping a home and making meals. And, that story I've told before about how I discovered that there was a way to do it. But what I wanted to comment on is that there are things that are important to each person in the marriage that are not equally important to the other person. This afternoon, I was talking with my husband about color palettes and like what season of clothing looks good on women. And I was explaining all this to him. And when I got done, I just looked at him and I said, you just sat there and listened to that whole conversation when it makes no difference to you whatsoever. And it honestly just impressed me so much that he listened to that because he cares about me. And I cared about it. And because my husband cares about having a meal planned at a certain time of day, for us, it's about 6:00. That makes it important to me. So have you found that to be, an issue with that you work with?
There were so many things you said in there that I thought were, I'm the more I listen to you, Melanie, I just think with this season of COVID and more people are going to be homeschooling, I'm more thankful for people like you that are putting out this quality information. And I mean that sincerely for homeschool families to be listening. There's going to be people looking for answers. And I'm thankful that there's your show and others that are going to be given this sort of information. So with that said, I completely agree with you. I think that I'll give you an example. My wife is a very visionary woman. She has lots of ideas. And if you were to look at her life, it was a life of constant changing, constant moving, all these new ideas and things like that. And I'm pretty much the opposite. I like consistency. I don't like change. I'm not adventurous. I'm not a risk taker. Moving from California, my wife and I grew up together. To come to Washington is one of the bigger risks that I took in my life. It's just not me. Starting to write books was a risk. It seemed like a risk because I don't think of new things. I like consistency. And all that to say, one of the things that my wife really appreciates, she has told me this, is even if there's very little chance of my ideas or visions coming true, I'm blessed by you listening to them and allowing me to share them, just like you said. And so maybe I hope you and my wife can meet someday. You guys might really, really love each other.
I would love that.
And so she just wants me to, and I'm in my mind, I might be thinking, I highly doubt this is ever going to happen, but I can actually see how it is blessing her. I can watch her physically be encouraged by me considering everything that she's saying. And for a guy like me, to be honest, that it's actually kind of could cause me almost anxiety to think about having to keep up with all of them and go here and do that and things like that. So that's a blessing to her. One of the things that Katie knows is a blessing to me is to have a schedule. She doesn't want a schedule. She doesn't like boundaries. She doesn't want things done at a certain time. And so, but she knows that that's important to me. So she's worked very hard to have a schedule and try to follow it. And to her, that makes her feel like almost like a prisoner in a sense, because she likes all the freedom of doing things when she feels like it and changing things up. And to me, I kind of look at her homeschooling day and I think I think, how can you do this? Because I was a school teacher myself, and what's needed, the organization. But one of the things that you said that I would also add that kind of relates to this is to look for what is, to appreciate different things about your spouse. And one thing that took place with me that was very encouraging and was almost a paradigm shift was I was with a friend who had a wife who's like super organized. My wife would look at this man's wife and my wife would probably say that this is what she thinks I want her to be like, just super scheduled, down to the minute and everything like that. So I'm talking to this friend of mine who's married to this woman, and he says something really wonderful about my wife, Katie, and he praises her. And I was kind of surprised because I thought he would probably always kind of look at his wife as being, I don't know, maybe superior in some way. And he said, no, I think your wife is amazing. And I said, well, what I think she's amazing too, but why are you saying that? And he said, because I see her flexibility. I see her ability to be in ministry with you and to adjust. And you go to this meeting, or you're going to camp, or everything that's involved. And he said to me, I'll never forget it. He said, if my wife had to do that, her head would explode. And he said, she can never do what Katie does. And I remember sitting there and I thought, wow, I am so blessed to have the wife that I do. God has been so good to give me this wife that does so well as a pastor's wife and can handle all of the difficulties associated with ministry as well as she does. And there's probably I don't know if it's an exaggeration, probably almost all other women would not be able to adjust like my wife is able to adjust because of her kind of visionary nature. And so I could spend my life thinking about that. I wish Katie was better organized, or I can think about how wonderful a pastor's wife she is and homeschooling mom and how she adjusts to things, so we should look for those strengths that our spouses have, not focus on the, weaknesses or things we wish were different.
That's just excellent. And also just going along with that is, and you were alluding to this, but seeing your spouse's characteristics and strengths as a gift from God to help protect you, to bring balance to your life. I am someone who I am a people pleaser, and I think, especially in years past, I've had 6 children beat this out of me to a great extent. But in the past, when someone would say, "Oh, would you do this for me?" I felt like I had to, to be a good person, I have to say yes. And my husband is not that way. He will just say, nope, I'm not going to do that. And I don't care if you're mad, I'm just not going to. And one particular time I was on the schedule to deliver a meal to a new mom. And my husband said, well, you're not going to do it. You just had a baby. What are you thinking? And I said, well, I have to do it. He said, no, you don't. That's ridiculous. And, it was having that other voice, in this case, a voice of reason saying, no, that's crazy. Why would you do that? Yeah. And I love how God does that. And then especially when he gives us a vision, just like what you had of your wife, of those strengths that you've been blessed with in your spouse.
Mm-hmm. And well, I think your husband is a wise, godly man who has your best interests in mind. And I'm sure you appreciate him doing that. That is one way for us to shepherd our wives, is to recognize we all have limitations. None of us are infinite like God. We have limited amounts of strength, energy, time. And it is a wise, caring husband that can look at his wife and say, no, I don't think you should do this. And you need to rest. You need to relax. Don't worry about trying to take this on. And as a pastor's wife, you can imagine Katie, the number of needs and ministries and things would be endless for her. Mm-hmm. And so I think if I had my choice, I love counseling with my wife. I love her being there, but I've told people, they said, I need some counseling, my wife and I, for this and that. And I'll tell them up front, I'll say, you know what, I'm happy to serve you the best that I can, but you need to know I'm probably not going to be able to bring Katie. So if you're looking to someone that ideally there should be a husband and wife, because a woman can feel ganged up on if it's her husband. And so it is more challenging. I'll just be honest with you. I would love to have my wife there with me, but mm-hmm. I know that she has limits. And so I'll tell people she's not going to be able to be here. So if you still want me to do it, I'm happy to do that. And in being as visionary as she is, she'll take on lots of different things and to kind of hedge her in a little bit and say, and so for ministry, I know how my wife is recharged. She enjoys conferences. She enjoys traveling with me for speaking. She likes doing these things. Those give her energy and give her life. We're both very extrovert. It's one reason I talked to you about great homeschool conventions. That's just, It's attractive to the two of us. We enjoy that environment and booths and talking to people. But that's because I know it recharges her and gives her energy. Mm-hmm. And there's other stuff that wears her down. And that's what a good husband does, is try to protect her. So I don't put much other stuff on her plate. So
that's so good. And I have determined that Katie and I could be dangerous together. we would probably concoct some plans that would make your head explode.
I believe it, Melody. I believe it.
Oh, well, this is so good. So I have, hopefully I have couples listening to this, homeschooling couples. What would you say a couple could do to really invest in their marriage? What's like a quick action step that a couple could take?
Mm-hmm. Very good. So I know it might sound like cliche, but if you keep Christ first in your marriage, then most other things have a way of working themselves out. And so generally kind of that analogy, if the vertical is doing well, if things are going well with the Lord, then the horizontal has a way of fixing itself. And so frequently marriage counseling for me, to give you an idea, people come in and they're talking about what their spouse is doing that's terrible. And then I kind of ask them, well, what does your devotional time in the Word look like? What does your prayer time look like? What does your time in worship look like? And I know these people. Maybe I haven't seen them at church too much. Maybe they're not too involved. And, the husband looks at me and he says, I just told you what my wife said to me the other day. Why are you asking me about what my time in the Word looks like? Or the wife says, I just told you how rude my husband was. Why are you asking me about his time in the Word or my time? And my answer is because these are all symptoms. What we're experiencing right here are symptoms of problems in your relationship with Christ. And so if a homeschooling family can be a Christ-centered family, if they can be focused on the Lord, there are many other things that just have a way of working themselves out. Many of the problems that we think are problems are actually just symptoms of the Lord not occupying that throne that he should in our homes. And so we want homes that revolve around the Lord, revolve around the Word of God, revolve around prayer. It doesn't have to be pretty. We've got a lot of small children. Sometimes it feels like, it's constantly like, sit up, pay attention, stop hitting your brother, stop, be quiet, follow on, verse 13, verse 14, and it's like, it's not the prettiest, but we think that if we're trying to put the Lord first, hopefully he's going to honor that. 1 Samuel 2:30, God honors those who honor him. And so that's what we're trying to do. And from a father, a pastor who has plenty of struggles in his home. And we, like I said, I don't want it. Sometimes you hear someone talk about family worship and you picture all the children sitting in this perfect little row with their Bibles on their lap. I don't know that it's ever looked like that. And so just be encouraged that God recognizes the effort. And I believe that he's going to, Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God. These other things will be added to you. I do believe that's a verse that God, honors in families and in marriages.
I love that. And, that's what I especially love about that is that is something that you can control. So if you are a homeschooling wife listening to us without your husband and you just feel like, I can do my part, but he's not going to do his part. You can do your part by going to the Lord and really focusing on that relationship first. Boy, I have had so many experiences where that has been proven to be true, that when that relationship between me and my Heavenly Father is strong, then it pulls the relationship between me and my husband closer together, even if he isn't responding in kind, and focusing on his own relationship. So that's an encouragement that I can give. Well, Scott, I know you said that you turn your sermons into books, which I think is brilliant. It's a brilliant use of your time and your work. But can you tell us the name of a book that you have on marriage that our listeners could get and where they could find it?
Yeah. So the whole authoring thing sort of started where I was writing out my sermons very thoroughly, and I preached on marriage at my church. And it's kind of a joke I haven't been able to live down, where it was going to be the marriage month. And it ended up being like the marriage year, marriage. And the feedback, I kind of feel out in my congregation. Are they getting tired of talking about, Solomon? Or are they getting tired of being in Ephesians? We need to pick this up a little bit. And kind of reading the congregation, I was enjoying it. I was getting a lot of good feedback. We have a lot of children in the service who are even learning they're going to be married at some point. There's older people are feeling glad that younger people are hearing this. And I took all that material, and that was my first book, Marriage God's Way. And that's how my ministry kind of began. And I just, by God's grace, it did well. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm still learning very much. And God, my prayer was that he would use it for his glory, and he has sold it, lots of copies of it. And then I was self-publishing. I started traditional publishing last year, and Harvest House Publishers, they said, we want to publish your next book, Finances God's Way, but we actually want to republish your book, Marriage God's Way. And so Marriage God's Way, which is currently available, is going to be coming out in September, republished as Your Marriage God's Way. They said they want to change the title. And there's an accompanying workbook. And then I published some other books, Enduring Trials God's Way, Work and Rest God's Way. And those, so you can find me on Amazon with my books there. But if you're looking for a marriage book and you've appreciated the things that I've shared, then I would encourage you to check out that book, Marriage God's Way, which again is going to be republished in September as Your Marriage God's Way. All
right. Fantastic. And you have a website too, don't you?
Yeah. So my website is just my name, scottlapierre.org. That's SCOTTLAPIERRE.org. And maybe you could put the link in the show notes or something. I have a free book. I have a free book available there. It's called it's a short read. It's called 7 Biblical Insights for Healthy, Joyful, Christ-Centered Marriages. And that's free to any of my listeners, just because I hope it can be a blessing to you and bless your marriage. But you can find out about my speaking and my family and other stuff about me there at my website, scottlapierre.org.
Well, I love it. I'm sure people will be checking it out. That's so generous of you. Thank you so much for making that book available. I know I will be checking it out too. And of course, I will have the link to your site. Scott, this has just really been a blessing. Thank you so much for taking the time away from your precious family to spend with us. It has definitely blessed us. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Thanks for having me. And again, I'm really thankful for your ministry, what you're doing. There's so much I can do as a pastor, but I know there's a lot of, especially women that are tuning in for answers and looking for counsel on homeschooling, especially during the season where more people are doing it. So I'm very thankful for you and your ministry. Thanks for having me on the show, and I'd love to come back anytime. So God bless you.
Thank you.
To connect with Scott and to get a free copy of Scott's book, 7 Biblical Insights for Healthy, Joyful, Christ-Centered Marriages, go to homeschoolsanity.com/strongmarriage. Thanks again to CTC Math for their sponsorship. Have a happy homeschool week. Thank you for joining me. Happy, healthy homeschooling can be yours. It begins with one small step. Let's continue the conversation on social media. I'm at Psycho with 6. This has been a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.